Mitch McConnell, this is the biggest headline news, big deal here in Washington. One of the longest serving Senate leaders in American history announcing that he will be retiring at the end of November. He announced that on the Senate floor yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Believe me, I know the politics within my party at this particular moment in time. I have many faults. Misunderstanding politics is not one of them. That said, I believe more strongly than ever that America's global leadership is essential to preserving the shining city on a hill that Ronald Reagan discussed. For as long as I'm drawing breath on this earth, I will defend American exceptionalism. So as I've been thinking about when I would deliver some news to the Senate, I always imagined a moment when I had total clarity and peace about the sunset of my work.
Even in that clip, Krystal, he's a frail man, and he's clearly not even close to what he once was. I mean,
a lot of Joe Biden vibes there, watching
a lot
him
of Joe Biden
try to
vibes.
get through that.
It's, I'm just putting it together with, this is a larger global phenomenon. It's kind of interesting to think about it in this context, which is that 10 years ago, there was only one world leader of the major, I think it was like G20 countries, which was under the age of 70. Today, there's 8 out of 10. So 10 years later, 8 out of 10 now of the global, like people like Modi, people like Biden, I forget. So many of them are much, much older than the average president. I mean, we have to go back and think, that how much press conversation there was about 60-something-year-old Ronald Reagan running for president. And he's a decade younger now, in this case, of the two people who are trying to assume that office for another 4 years. And just a reminder, that we all probably need here about McConnell, like he's still retiring far, far too late. And don't forget, he's still got, up until November that he wants to serve out his term. We have all of this we can show you. Just to, we can't forget that we had a full-blown meltdown on a camera. And the craziest thing is it happened twice. Not to mention, the bruised hands, which is often indication of IV. It's something that showed up on the Queen, before she died very, very quickly. And when you have people who are in this state, who are so clearly frail, and it's in a certain point, great. I'm glad you're going for ideological reasons and for health reasons, but he's still insisting, Krystal, on staying up until November. I mean, the honesty of it is the same thing with Feinstein, the same thing with Biden, where how do the people around him tolerate this? Like, how can you allow somebody to continue in this job after you've suffered massive health events on camera? Yeah. And by the way, don't forget, the cope from the McConnell team is it's only happened twice. They just happened to only happen on camera.
Okay.
Which is like 1% of his life.
And we never got an explanation for what the hell was going on there either. I mean, they made up some nonsense, which is ridiculous. But yeah, do you have a theory of why that is, that there are so many aging world leaders and it's not just a U.S. phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of it is demographic. There was a huge baby boom in the 1940s. Baby boomers here is not necessarily a unique phenomenon. It's the same all across the world. So I think that they're very likely, you still have kind of the median voter theory, especially here in the West and in a lot of other voluntary democracies where people who are younger in general don't engage in the political system, and people who are old like to not only elect people who are their own age, but in some cases the people that they look up to, which is what will have the older boomers or the silent generation people like Joe Biden. So yeah. I think that's a possible explanation. And it does actually make a lot of sense. Obviously, there's a medical thing that comes in here too. Life expectancy. I mean, life expectancy in America, if you're in the top 10% of wealth, is something like 92 years old, which is crazy. I mean, because it averages out, I think, at like 72. But that's because when you combine everybody. But when you look at it by wealth, like if you have money in this country, you're going to live for a long time. So it's one of those where the life expectancy, especially among that top 10%, has gone now so high that, in some cases, many of these people are actually able to function at a much older than they would have been able to 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. One thing I know you pointed to in a previous monologue that was focused on America, but I mean, what happens here has reverberations around the world, is sort of like a democratic decline.
Yes.
In terms of like small d democracy and the people actually having choice and actually being able to like have some say over who their political leadership is, and tying that to this increasingly aged political class. And I thought that was very insightful and certainly ties into how you end up with, Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters, all these people, right? Jim Clyburn. I mean, all of these people are way, 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 way past their prime. There's a few things that are noteworthy here. First of all, noteworthy that McConnell is stepping down from leadership at a time when very possible that Republicans are able to win back the majority in the Senate. So that's noteworthy. It's also noteworthy, he's not saying he's stepping down from his Senate seat. So we can give him some kudos from stepping down for leadership. But I mean, this very old man who's freezing and having all kinds of problems on camera, and we don't know what's going on with his health, is still planning to stick around in Washington for years to come. So don't worry, you haven't seen the last of Mitch McConnell. The other thing is, there's been this conversation about this is the last sort of denizen of the, the old Republican order. No. And I understand that conversation in a sense, but first of all, a lot of that old Republican order still really runs the machinery here in Washington behind the scenes. And second of all, when push came to shove, Mitch McConnell and when Donald Trump was president, he did everything that Trump wanted him to. On policy, they didn't have a lot of significant divides. Now, I know there's this idea that they're wildly different on Ukraine, but it's not even clear to me at this point what Trump doesn't really talk about Ukraine a lot. It's not even clear to me at this point what his Ukraine policy would actually be. So, and Trump, of course, when he was in office, his signature accomplishment was a business-friendly and rich people-friendly tax cut that would be something that Mitch McConnell absolutely loved and was happy to bring to the donor class. So in some ways, I think the ideological divide between them is really overstated. There's more of a vibe divide between them than I think there is really truly ideological gulf between the two of them.
It depends, because the thing is that in 2017, it genuinely was impactful to have Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell that were in charge. And the main consequence of that really is border policy, and specifically the border wall. So it was this huge fight in 2017 that actually culminated in the TCJA over not only building a border wall, but something called a border adjustment tax. Now, to be clear, I highly support this tax, regardless of whether it pays for a border wall or not, because it's a trade adjustment in terms of goods that cross over from Mexico. The number one opponent of the BAT, as it's known kind of here in D.C., are Walmart and all these other people that are shipping all this cheap product across the border. It's a major consequence of NAFTA. We tried to clean up some of it in the, what is it called? The whatever replaced NAFTA, I forget off the top of my head. My point is that BAT is 100% at the feet of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. So it's not that, yeah, you're right. The TCJA and all that definitely did pass, but there were certain Bannon-esque type visions, like a major infrastructure package, the BAT, border wall, probably some immigration reform. I can think of repeal and replace Obamacare and all of that, where, marginal but still important, where McConnell certainly did have a difference. Now, in terms of the leadership, I do want to highlight your point. I think you are correct, and we have this up here we could put on the screen. We'll just look at who the actual Republican leadership is. A lot of people forget, number 2 is going to be John Thune, South Dakota. He's as establishment as it gets. I mean, he's the guy who thought Tim Scott should run for president. He's such a genius politician. John Barrasso over at Wyoming is the Senate Republican Conference chairman. Joni Ernst, same thing, Republican Conference Committee chairman. The conference vice chairman is Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia. And then the NRSC chairman is Steve Daines at Montana. These are all dyed-in-the-wool, very classic Republicans. I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of a Ukraine dissident amongst any of those 6. Now, something that has been flagged to me, though, by kind of some of the observers here in D.C. is that a lot of this does not depend on existing Senate leadership. A lot of this rides on November and that map, which we have here actually up on the screen, and people can see in front of you. You've got in front of you where the actual toss-up states from Ohio, Montana, and Arizona, where you genuinely have no idea what will happen for the actual Senate, the Senate incumbents, Democrats specifically, in all 3 of those, whether they will be flipped Republican or Democrat. A lot of that is going to ride on the general election on Trump and or Biden and whatever the macro kind of determination there is. Let's say there is a Republican sweep and you've got 53, I could definitely see, because in that case, I think Trump would get elected. Then I think a more MAGA-aligned figure might become the chairman of the Senate Majority Leader in that case. Let's say that all three of those go D, Trump gets defeated at the ballot box, then there could actually be kind of a movement against more MAGA types, and John Thune or Tim Scott or somebody like that might assume the leadership. And of course, in that position, they would either be the leader or, depending, it could go 51 like it is currently for the Democrats, it would be the minority leader. Then I would definitely see them move right back to McConnell status, who was most comfortable blocking things from Obama than actually enacting legislation himself.
Yeah,
that's really his legacy, right?
I guess what I would say is this. First of all, the idea that Trump is some like dissident renegade with wildly different views than the traditional Republican conference is overstated. And second of all, the fact that the party has already completely capitulated to Donald Trump. So I guess the only way it matters on the margins is like, no one's saying Mitch McConnell was a stupid man. He was very intelligent in terms of knowing how to work the levers of power behind the scenes. I don't know if John Thune, John Barrasso, Joni Ernst, or whoever might come up after him has that same level of prowess. Of course, again, McConnell is going to be around, so they can be getting advice for him if there are areas where they differ from Donald Trump and want to sort of like undermine and undercut him. But, I don't know if it's as consequential at this point as you might think, because Trump already owns this Republican Party. Whether you used to be, whether you're part of the establishment or not part of the establishment or whatever, has more to do with kind of like your attitude and your vibe than it does real policy positions, as we've seen a million times. You think about like a Jim Jordan being coded as MAGA when he has the most standard issue Tea Party conservative Republican views of all time. So it becomes more about vibe and attitude. And then, they've already decided that there's no way they can go up against Donald Trump on anything that he actually is going to care about and actually like try to fight for. So I'm not sure in terms of what the next term looks like, if Trump ends up being president, that it's going to matter all that much.
I do think Ukraine is the one where, look, I don't know what Trump thinks about Ukraine. I don't think he knows what he thinks about Ukraine, depending on the day. That said, McConnell had such a deep ideological commitment at many points, being the only member of his caucus willing to try and to go past, willing to try and work with the Democrats. That going away is actually genuinely impactful, where you even had John Thune and all of them. Now, again, I don't know how it moves on the margins. A lot of this depends on what the hell happens in November. A lot of it depends on, what it looks like at that point. But there is an ideology, on McConnell's part, where I think the people who are coming up after him, again, depending on what actually happens with the election, where we could see some change, but don't overstate it either. You're right, which is, some people think there's going to be some grand revolution. I don't think so. The only thing I think might change a little bit is immigration. That's the one where McConnell is not as ideological on that issue. He's more of a get along. He doesn't have very strong views. If anything, he's more of a big business type. Where if he had somebody who's more hardline on immigration, I think things could change a little bit. But I'm not sure.
I mean, maybe, but I think most of the action on these things is going to be through the executive branch anyway. I mean, because you're still going to have a filibuster. You're still going to have opposition in the Senate, even if they're able to narrowly take in the majority. So I think, looking at Project 25 and these other efforts to like really figure out the limits and bounds of their power, what they can do through the executive branch without having to go through the House or the Senate is probably more where to focus in terms of what's actually to happen. Just one last quick note, throw the Senate map back up there, because I just want to make clear for people that, it's very, very close.
A5, please.
Who's going to have control of the Senate next time around? Basically, it comes down to these 3 toss-up states. In order for Democrats to keep the majority, they'd have to win the White House, and they have to hold on to these toss-up states: Arizona, Montana, Ohio. Now, you look at that, it's not a great map because, first of all, Ohio and Montana are red states at this point, and so that is very difficult terrain. However, for whatever reason, they seem to really love John Tester up there in Montana. He's got like a 10-point lead consistently in the polls that are coming out. Now, who knows? It's a long time till Election Day. Polls can be off, blah, blah, blah. But he seems to be holding pretty strong there. The Sherrod Brown race in Ohio is very, very close. The polling has it, effectively a tie. I think Brown usually has like a 2-point margin over his opponent, who I think the Republican primary is still ongoing, so I'm not sure who he's going up against. But that one appears like it'll be very, very close. And Arizona also appears like it will be really close. Arizona, of course, a swing state at this point. So, you're looking at a landscape where you'd really kind of need everything to fall in Democrats' direction in order for them to hold on to the Senate. But, they have a shot at doing it. It's not like it's preposterous to imagine that they could hold on to it.
In November 2020, I'm sitting at a desk and telling you that there are going to be 2 Democratic senators from Georgia. Like, what do we think? We were really sure
we
about
were
that?
near. We were like, no way.
Like, maybe,
not going to happen.
Not. Yeah, guess what happened? So, anything can happen.
Yeah.
I really have no idea.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.